Here's something I've been thinking about lately. Most of us live in a world that's constantly updating. New apps every week. Construction everywhere. That coffee shop you liked? It's a vape lounge now. Or a co-working space. Or both. But what if I told you there are places in America where none of that really happened? Towns where cars were banned more than a century ago and never came back. Where your phone simply stops working the moment you arrive. Where an entire town shrank down to a single resident and stayed that way. These aren't theme parks. No retro branding. No vintage coffee shops pretending to be old. These are real places where the future showed up. And something about it just didn't stick. Today, we're counting down 10 American towns where life feels frozen in another era, from isolated mountain towns to sinking islands in the bay. And wait until you see the place where one person runs the bar, the library, and the entire town government. Let's dive in. Number 10, Havana, Illinois. The river town that never sped up. So we're starting in Havana, Illinois, about an hour outside Springfield. Population around 3,000, and the first thing you notice is nothing's rushing here. Downtown looks like someone took a photograph from 1965 and just kept it. Brick storefronts, old neon signs that actually work. A movie theater that looks like it could still be showing a double feature from the 60s. Now here's what surprised me about Havana. It's not just nostalgic, it's actually practical. Median home price? Around $80,700. That's not a typo. In most cities, that wouldn't even cover a down payment. Rent typically runs under $800 a month. Cost of living is about 28% below the national average. Crime rates fall below national levels. Jobs are stable, healthcare, education, agriculture. It's not booming, but it's steady. So what's the trade-off? You're swapping speed for stability. No rush hour, no endless construction, no pressure to keep up with every trend, but also no nightlife scene. The biggest crowd in town might be at the bait shop on Saturday morning. Life here moves at the pace of the river. Slow, steady, mostly unchanged. And honestly, compared to where we're going next, Havana almost feels modern. Number 9, Mineral Point, Wisconsin. The town that chose not to change. Mineral Point feels different because it didn't just fall behind, it made a choice. While the rest of the country raced toward highways, malls, and chain restaurants, Mineral Point quietly said, no thanks. This town of about 2,500 people used to be a booming mining community. Cornish immigrants founded it in the 1800s. When the mine shut down, most towns would panic, try to reinvent, build something new. Mineral Point did the opposite. They kept what they had. The limestone buildings stayed. The narrow streets stayed. The old storefronts stayed. And now the entire downtown feels like a time capsule from mid-century America. Here's what that looks like in numbers. Median home prices sit around $300,000. Cost of living runs slightly below the national average. Crime rates are very low. Unemployment usually stays under 3%. It's not a fast-growing place, but it's stable, predictable, and affordable by modern standards. Most jobs come from local businesses, tourism, and small manufacturing. Nothing flashy, just steady. And here's what I find interesting. Life here has a rhythm. Main Street is filled with independent shops, art studios, and cafes. No chains. People wave at each other from porches. If you ask where the nearest Starbucks is, someone might just point you toward the diner that's been pouring the same coffee for 40 years. Mineral Point didn't freeze by accident. It decided the past was worth keeping. And compared to our next stop, this place almost feels busy. Number 8, Saugatuck, Michigan. The lakeside town that still runs on a rope. Saugatuck sits right on Lake Michigan, fewer than 900 full-time residents. And the pace of life here is tied to the water, the weather, and a rhythm that hasn't really changed in decades. Downtown feels like a beach town from another era. Pastel storefronts, striped awnings, art galleries. Nothing feels rushed. But here's the part that got me. There's a ferry here. The Saugatuck Chain Ferry. It's been operating since the 1800s, and it doesn't have an engine. It pulls itself across the Kalamazoo River using a hand-cranked cable. Just a rope, a platform, and time. That's it. Now, living here isn't cheap. Median home prices hover around $600,000, mainly because of that Lake Michigan location. Crime rates are very low. Jobs revolve around tourism, hospitality, arts, seasonal visitors, quiet winters. So what are you trading? Convenience for atmosphere. There are no big shopping centers, no rush hour traffic, not much late night life. But there are sunsets over the lake, slow mornings at coffee shops, neighbors who recognize you after a few visits. Even the ferry refuses to move fast. And compared to what's coming, this place still looks almost ordinary. Number 7, Abilene, Kansas. The town that never left the Eisenhower era. Abilene, population around 6,500. The calendar kept turning here, but the lifestyle didn't. This is President Eisenhower's hometown, and that legacy is everywhere. Streets named after him, museums, local businesses, the whole town carries his name. Downtown looks like it's preserved in amber from the 1950s and 60s, classic storefronts, old-fashioned diners, a main street that still functions as the center of daily life. The numbers tell the story. Median home price around $176,000, cost of living 8% below national average, low crime rates, unemployment typically under 4%. Jobs come from agriculture, education, healthcare, small local businesses, not booming, consistent. Life here moves at a predictable pace. Little traffic, no big nightlife, most errands can be done within a few blocks. People greet each other by name. The busiest place in town might be the diner during breakfast. So it's fewer options, fewer distractions, fewer surprises. But also lower costs, quieter streets, and a sense that not everything has to change just because the rest of the country did. And compared to the next town on this list, Abilene almost feels modern. Number 6, Bisbee, Arizona, the mining town where the 60s never left. Bisbee, Arizona is where things start getting interesting. This old copper mining town sits in the mountains near the Mexican border, population around 5,000. And when the mines closed in the 1970s, something unexpected happened. Instead of dying out, the town attracted a completely different crowd. Artists, retirees, people who wanted to escape modern life, and they moved into the old miners' houses and just stayed. Now Bisbee feels like a 1960s counterculture town that got preserved in the desert heat. Colorful buildings clinging to hillsides, narrow winding streets, vintage signs, psychedelic murals next to century-old mining equipment. Median home price sits around $220,000, cheaper than most cities, but not dirt cheap. Cost of living is about 8% below the national average. Crime rates are low. Jobs are mostly tourism, arts, small businesses. The vibe here is laid back, artistic, slightly offbeat. There are no big box stores. In fact, there are almost none. Streets are narrow. Buildings lean into the hills. Nothing feels perfectly straight or polished. Antique shops next to psychic readings, old bars next to art galleries, staircases instead of sidewalks. Bisbee didn't freeze in time the way some towns did. It replaced the future with something older, stranger, and slower. And compared to the next town, Bisbee still feels surprisingly connected to the outside world. Number 5, Silverton, Colorado. The mountain town the highway forgot. Silverton, Colorado sits more than 9,000 feet above sea level, deep in the San Juan Mountains. Getting here isn't something you do by accident. There's one main road in, one road out, and for much of its history, the only reliable connection was a steam train winding through the canyon. With a population of just over 780 people, Silverton feels less like a town and more like a high-altitude time capsule. Main Street is lined with old brick buildings, wooden storefronts, and saloons that look like they were built for a Western film set, except they weren't. Most of them have been standing there since the mining boom of the late 1800s. When the mines declined, Silverton didn't grow into a resort city or a commuter town. It simply stayed small. Today, the median home price sits around $530,000. Crime isn't usually the first thing people worry about here, and the local economy revolves around tourism, seasonal work, and the historic railroad that still brings visitors into town. Life here moves slowly, partly by choice and partly because of the altitude. Winters are long, roads can close, and even basic errands take more effort when the air is thin. There are no big chains, no major highways, and not much reason for the outside world to rush in. In Silverton, the mountains set the schedule, not the clock. And compared to the next place on this list, even this isolated town feels a little connected. Number 4, Mackinac Island, Michigan. The American town where cars never arrived. Mackinac Island sits in Lake Huron between Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas, and the moment you step off the ferry, something feels different. There's no traffic noise, no engines idling at intersections, and no rush of cars speeding down the street. That's because cars have been banned here for over a century. In 1898, the island passed a law prohibiting automobiles after early vehicles frightened horses. The rule was never reversed. Today, with a year-round population of around 600 residents, transportation still works the old-fashioned way, on foot, by bicycle, or by horse-drawn carriage. The downtown area looks like a preserved slice of late 19th and mid-20th century America. Colorful wooden buildings, old hotels, and traditional storefronts line the streets. There are no chain restaurants, no traffic lights, and no parking lots. Even deliveries move by wagon. Living here comes at a price. Median home values often exceed $487,000, driven by tourism and limited housing supply. Crime rates are extremely low, and most jobs are tied to seasonal tourism, hospitality, and local services. Winters are quiet, with only the year-round residents remaining after the last ferry leaves. Life on Mackinac Island runs on older rhythms. Horses replace engines, bicycles replace traffic jams, and the loudest sound on the street is usually the clip-clop of hooves on pavement. And compared to the next town on this list, Mackinac Island still feels connected to the modern world. Number 3. Green Bank, West Virginia. The American town where your phone stops working. In most of the country, losing your signal feels like a problem. In Green Bank, it's the entire point. This small Appalachian town sits inside the National Radio Quiet Zone, a federally protected area where radio transmissions are heavily restricted. The reason is simple. Green Bank is home to one of the world's largest fully steerable radio telescopes, and even a small electronic signal can interfere with its work. So, cell towers are banned, Wi-Fi is limited, and many everyday devices are either restricted or carefully monitored. The result is a town of about 30 residents where modern communications simply never arrived. You won't see people scrolling through their phones at the diner because most phones don't work here. Internet speeds are slow, streaming is unreliable, and some residents still rely on landlines as their main connection to the outside world. Housing is relatively affordable, with median home prices often under $152,000. Crime rates are extremely low, and most jobs are tied to the observatory, small local businesses, or remote work that can tolerate slow connections. It's quiet, isolated, and intentionally disconnected. For some people, that's the whole appeal. Green Bank has quietly become a refuge for those who want to escape constant notifications, crowded cities, and the pressure of always being online. In Green Bank, the future didn't just slow down, it was turned off at the switch, and compared to the next town on this list, even this digital blackout feels crowded. Number 2, Tangier Island, Virginia. The island where time and land are slipping away. Out in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay sits Tangier Island, a small fishing community that feels centuries removed from the modern world. The population is only about 400 people. This island isn't connected to the mainland by any bridge. The only way in or out is by boat or small plane, and that isolation has helped preserve a way of life that feels almost untouched by time. Many of Tangier's residents are descendants of English settlers who arrived in the 1600s, and their speech still carries traces of that original accent. Linguists have studied the island for decades because some locals sound closer to colonial-era English than to modern American speech. Walk down the narrow streets, and you'll hear phrases, rhythms, and pronunciations that feel like they came from another century. Life here revolves around the water. Most jobs are tied to crabbing and fishing, just as they were generations ago. There are no high-rise buildings, no big shopping centers, and very little nightlife. The median home price is often under $230,000. Crime is extremely low, and the pace of life follows the tides rather than the clock. But Tangier faces a problem time can't fix. The island is slowly sinking and eroding into the bay. Scientists estimate that large parts of it could disappear within decades if nothing changes. In Tangier, the past isn't just preserved, it's also fragile. And compared to the final town on this list, even this disappearing island feels crowded. Number 1, Monowi, Nebraska. The American town with just one resident. In most towns, you need a council, a mayor, and a handful of neighbors to keep things running. In Monowi, Nebraska, one person does it all. Monowi sits in the northeastern corner of the state, surrounded by open farmland and long stretches of quiet highway. Once, a few dozen people lived here, working in agriculture and raising families. But like many rural towns across the Great Plains, younger generations moved away, businesses closed, and the population slowly shrank. By the early 2000s, only two residents remained, Rudy and Elsie Eiler. When Rudy passed away in 2004, Elsie became the only person left in town, and she's still there today. That means Elsie is the mayor, the city council, the clerk, and the librarian. Every year, she files the town's paperwork, renews its liquor license, and signs the official documents, sometimes twice, once for each role. She also runs the Monowi Tavern, the town's only business, serving drinks and simple meals to the occasional traveler or curious visitor. The median home price in the area is under $134,000. Crime is essentially non-existent, and the pace of life is as quiet as it gets. There are no traffic lights, no schools, and no neighbors, unless you count the people who drive in from nearby farms. Monowi isn't just frozen in time, it's frozen in population. And in a country of cities growing bigger every year, this tiny dot on the map might be the clearest example of what happens when the future simply stops showing up.